Thank you, Helen, and good morning, everyone. Happy Sabbath. Good to see you all here. As Gary mentioned, we're excited to go to the domes. It's sometimes at church, on the Sabbath, we want to keep our conversation, holy like God has instructed. So it's good not that we're going to have unholy conversation, but we may get to know each other in a different way when we group together. So we're excited to go. Again, the mission's covered. We can carpool. So we hope that you'll join us. And if we do something like this next year, we can plan ahead too, right? And think about people that might enjoy something like this. So many beautiful parts out there. I just wanted to mention too, Gary said we'll be having this cooking school. It's on his birthday. So that's the ultimate sacrifice, Gary. You're going to be there? We hope. I didn't know that when I scheduled it, that it says on his birthday. But we're excited that in Lake Geneva, we're going to start there and hopefully bring this over to Delavan next year. At the Y, they have a program during the summer, and they give out free lunches, bag lunches to the community. And you can sponsor a week of that. And so we're sponsoring, the church is sponsoring a week of the free lunches. We'll go, and Victor and I, will make up the sandwiches and things. And then you can see their little food truck there. I don't know if you can see, but it says this week's sponsor, and so our name will be there. And then there's a whiteboard inside the truck with our big name and logo. And then they will also do a little flyer that they attach to the outside with our name and logo. And we're going to be able to put a flyer on the inside about the cooking school. So at the very, very least, between 300 and 350 people will see our name, and they will see our flyer as we get the word out of what we're doing in the community. We'll go ahead and advertise that on the Lake Life Facebook page as well. So keep praying about that. We hope we'll get some community members. And again, at the very least, we're feeding the community, and we are getting our Seventh-day Adventist name out there. So of these ye may freely eat. Thank you, Helen, for reading that scripture. That was, Barb and I were talking earlier, that was the name of the first cookbook I had when I became a vegetarian. One day I ate meat, and the next day I never ate meat again, and that was 30 years ago. And so it was just kind of this big transformation for me. And I know it's not like that for a lot of people. And as I have spoken about different health topics over the years, we've done cooking schools. We spoke at a big event in Tucson one time with Dr. Neil Barnard. We had one of the breakout groups. And what was really interesting is I would always say, I'm from Wisconsin, and I'd say, what's Wisconsin known for, right? And they'd all raise their hand, beer, cheese, all of that, and I'd say yes. And so this was a big, big change for me. And as I mentioned in Sabbath school, a big change for my family as well. They didn't quite understand what that was all about. And as Helen read, God said, behold, I've given you every herb bearing seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree, in the which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for food. Isn't it interesting that right off the bat, in the Bible, God tells us how to eat? He's like, okay, I created you. I created you to eat and to enjoy that gift that I've given you. And so he gives us instruction pretty much right in the first chapter of Genesis of what we should be eating and how he's blessed us with that. Obviously, over the thousands of years, that's been really, really perverted, hasn't it? And man's tastes and food, what we consider food and good food and all of that. It's very, very different from here in the beginning. As we look at the animals, we were talking about this in Sabbath school, the elephant, the gorilla, all the following animals have in common that they, are vegetarian. We look at our cow, this is a dairy cow, correct? Here in Wisconsin, we see a lot of those, right? And one reason not to drink cow's milk is because the chemical makeup that God created the milk from the cow to make a calf, a cow, a couple tons in a 2-year period. So if you want to have that type of growth, then cow's milk is a great milk for you. If not, you may want to look at some alternatives, some nut milks or other milks that don't have that type of makeup that cause that growth and weight. Cows weigh about 1,500 pounds, but up to 2,500. They drink up to 30 gallons of water a day, wow, which is a bathtub full. And they eat about 50 pounds of food a day. So they're quite the animal. You always see them, don't you, munching. Then we've got our deer. We've got this little trail that goes down to the Y from where we live. And sometimes I'll look up and, oh boy, there's 3 deer. And I know you guys are used to that here. But it's still a surprise for me when I encounter them on the trail. And it's really absolutely quite beautiful. The deer are able to run up to 40 miles an hour. They jump 9-foot fences. And they can swim 13 miles per hour. So the deer are also quite the animals. Zebras are so beautiful, aren't they? I've really only seen a zebra once in person, and that was at the Albuquerque Zoo, and I was just amazed. And of course, their beauty, though, right? They are prey for so many animals. You see that on National Geographic. But zebras are pretty amazing as well. They have been known to kill hyenas with a single kick. But unfortunately, those hyenas, they pack up and they will take a zebra down. That's one of their targets, to be sure. They run 40 miles per hour, too, so zebras are pretty quick. Then we have the elephant that we were talking about earlier. How do you think those people feel in that car? That looks like a pretty old picture, but I'd be a little, ooh, what's going on there? Elephants are amazing creatures as well. They weigh from 5,000 to 15,000 pounds. They are the big ones. A pride of lions can take an elephant down, but not one lion. And then our friend the gorilla, right? The gorilla. Gorillas weigh up to 600 pounds, so they're a big animal as well. Not as big as the elephant, of course. And, right, we have our giraffes. And the giraffes are amazing. They're so tall, they get to those trees. They eat up to 100 pounds of food in a day. Isn't that something else? A newborn giraffe is already 6 feet tall when it comes out, right? So ladies, we can't complain about childbirth, can we? We've got the giraffe birthing the 6-foot tall baby. A lion can die if kicked by a giraffe. So very, very strong animals. And once again, they're all vegetarian, right? Victor was telling about his story about the guy in the gym. I'll tell you, if that had been me, I would have been talking to him. But we would have set that protein thing straight. But when you look at all of these animals, right? And, now I've been vegetarian for 30 years, like some of you, and they measure your protein levels every year at your physical, and my protein levels are always, just great. So that really is a myth, isn't it? And it's a myth that people have. So many myths that we have in our society, and we have them in the church, are because we really want to live a certain way, or we want to do certain things. And so we hang on to those myths, and they seem to be becoming more and more prevalent in our society on so many things, right? Our alternate facts, not rooted in anything, not rooted in the Bible, not even rooted in scientific methods. Job 12:7, but ask the animals, and they will teach you. The birds of the air, and they will tell you. The animals have a lot to teach us, don't they? Just the fact that those animals are vegetarian, that should be teaching us something that, boy, they are so strong and so mighty, and yet they exist off the plants. And you have probably told people when they ask about the protein, well, I just get my source directly. It doesn't have to travel through the cow or travel through the deer. I eat a plant-based diet, and that way I just get it directly, right? So that's always a good answer when they ask you about protein. The last Sunday, Victor and I, we're still kind of touristy, right? So because we're snowbirds, and So what we do, we try to do maybe once a week, is we say, okay, we've got our goals. We list what we have to get done, all of our work, and then we say, okay, and at 2 o'clock, we're going to go here. So last Sunday, we went to Kenosha, and it was raining. I don't know if you remember last time, but it was raining. But we both said, you know what? If we wait for it to stop raining around here, we're not going to go anywhere. So we just decided to get in the car and go. And it was great. It actually stopped raining. We were the only ones down at the lakefront, just about. It was pretty amazing if you've been down there. And they have a trolley at the bottom there. And they have a streetcar, the old streetcar. And we were able to ride on both of those. Nobody else, it was really fun. I think they're both $1. Anyway, I got a chance to talk with each of the drivers. And the one guy was probably in his 50s. He was very overweight. And I started talking with him. And he told me about his, heart condition or something that he had. And so I said, and we started talking about the meat and everything. And he said, yeah, I know that I should do that. In fact, my doctor told me to get off of red meat and and I said, and so we had a conversation about that. And then we went on the streetcar. We got off that and we went on the little streetcar, and there was the guy, an African-American guy, and he was very nice, but he also was very overweight. And so he said, well, I'm going to give you a little tour. You're the only one on the streetcar today. So that's so nice. This is a blessing. This is a divine appointment, And he was a person who believed in the Lord. And so we chatted, and he goes, now, if you're looking for a restaurant, that's a great one. And he pointed to this bar, and I go, we don't drink. And then, okay. And what about this one? I said, we're vegan, and so, okay, well. So we had a great conversation about that, and he too said, I'm gonna do better. He said, I'm gonna get off some of this stuff, these burgers, and I'm really gonna try. And I said, okay, well, we'll pray for you. And what was really interesting about these two gentlemen is I didn't know them, they didn't know me. I was just a tourist who jumped on their bus. Right away, we got to the heart of the matter through the health message, right? And that was just such a blessing. I didn't, start quoting Bible. I didn't whatever, but we were able, and I was able to say, in the beginning, that's the way it was meant to be. And they both, one more spiritual than the other, but they both agreed. They knew that was true. Psalm 104:14, he causes the grass to grow for the cattle, and herb for the service of man, that he may bring forth food out of the earth. So that is where our food source should come from. Ellen White was a great health reformer. She was shown as a part of the third angel's message that it's just as closely connected with it are the arm and hand with the human body. So the health reform, you've heard that is the right hand of the gospel. I saw that we as a people must make an advance move in this great work. Ministers and people must act in concert. And so I think you'll find if you can get on the topic of health or somebody's ailments or, what they're experiencing, this is a great door opener with people where you can be a blessing and then share that indeed you are a Seventh-day Adventist. And when they say, what is that? I always say, well, just in our name. We believe in the creation Sabbath, which is the seventh day of the week. 24-hour period, and we believe Jesus is coming back, and he wants us to have an abundant life. So it's a really nice, easy way to share. One reason why we don't enjoy more of the blessing of the Lord is we don't heed the light which he has been pleased to give us in regard to the laws of life and health. So I think Gary said in his prayer, I thought was very apt, we live and live and live, and then we want to reclaim our health once it's gone, and that's tough. And that's why a preventative lifestyle is always going to be the best lifestyle. I think both of you know that Victor and I, were raised Catholic. I was, almost, I was in my late 30s, 40s. Victor, too, and became vegetarian. And, really, you suffer. For you who were raised Seventh-day Adventist and perhaps vegetarian, that's a blessing. That really is a blessing. So those of us who weren't, we had to recoup. We had to, gain our health back. And you never want to be in that situation. You always want to be ahead of the curve when it comes to your body, because it's a lot tougher to gain your health back than to prevent so many of these diseases. Ellen White, people think in our day, she was this. Actually, there were numerous health reformers and numerous churches that believed in a health message back then. She was not unusual in this. Sylvester Graham is one of them. He was a Presbyterian. He stands out as a leading light among the health reformers in the antebellum years before the Civil War. Again, a Presbyterian, he began his career as a reformer, lecturing against the evils of strong drink. In the 1800s, it was an era of transformation. It was known as the Second Great Awakening. The Mormon Church emerged during this time. The Seventh-day Adventist Church emerged. So what we have to remember, there's always a counterfeit. When God raises something up, the devil is watching. He's going to raise something up. That's a counterfeit. So whenever we know that's happening, we know, wow, there's something true here. We have to find it. But it was commonplace for sermons. They railed against alcohol and tobacco and all of that. That was common. And they would have these tent meetings and so on. And pretty much all the Protestant preachers were saying this. Sylvester Graham loudly declared that the foods on Americans' plates also contributed to such moral failings, and he asserted that a healthy diet would lead to a morally superior life. To Graham, this meant giving up alcohol, meat, and processed foods. But when he first took to the pulpit after being ordained, he announced two evils, promiscuity and gluttony, were what's going to bring people down. He specifically targeted bread as the crux of the country's moral failings. He told tales of how Americans once baked whole wheat bread at home and now indulged in factory-made white bread, which he claimed was an evil to eat such vile stuff. However, he had some wisdom here. In an era before food safety, Graham was onto something. Bakers did bulk up their white flour with chalk or clay. Rather than buy such harmful bread from bakeries, Graham created his own version. It was a much more coarse, whole wheat flour, and he called it Graham flour. He encouraged his followers to bake loaves of this dense, coarsely ground flour as well. And I think he had the principle right. It wasn't necessarily, the bread, but he had the whole picture of, as we grow closer to the Lord, we want to clean our body, our minds, our lifestyle, and that's really what it's all about. I think too often we get caught up on rules. Remember the Adventist days when Adventists ate out of cans. Well, was that healthy? If you look at the label on the cans and all the food coloring and the different additives that they had in there in the 50s and 60s, not really healthy. However, we always have to look at things in light of the era in which we're living, the time in which we're living. And at that time, it was an alternative, right, to meat because of vegetarianism. I admire Adventists in the 30s, 40s, 50s who were vegetarian because that really was highly unusual. But now, right? Now, I have to tell you, not as much in Wisconsin here. But in Arizona, you go to a restaurant, there's multiple vegetarian items on just about every menu. Here, not quite as much yet. But certainly, like these two bus drivers, they knew what I was talking about, and they knew that it was truth. And now, of course, we have the graham cracker. I looked up the ingredients on it. Not quite as healthy as when Sylvester Graham invented this, but some of them have high fructose corn syrup and food colorings, what have you. But there's still some that are pretty pure, and you can certainly make your own. But I think he had it right in that our spirituality is linked to, what we put in our mouth. However, Internet headline 2024, meet Sylvester Graham, the religious health nut who thought white bread was evil. And it's interesting because Ellen White sometimes is referred to like this as well, like she was a nut. And really, when you study her writing, so much when it comes to lifestyle has now been proven by science. And really, poor Mr. Graham, the Wonder Bread, yes, it's a wonder you're alive if you eat it on a regular basis. Because you could take that bread, I did this with my 4th grade the year I taught, and we took it and, right? So, Wonder Bread, yes, it is a wonder. The whiter the bread, the sooner you're dead. And so when we look at, you can make paper mache out of it really easily. You just add some water and it'll stick together. So anyway, some of these health reformers really had some wisdom for their day. And it's pretty amazing. And it saddens me when they're called fanatics or health nuts or whatever, because science is proving them true. The Seventh-day Adventists were leaders, weren't they? Leaders in this health reform, along with other Christian groups. Again, this was not unusual, but they were the leader. The Battle Creek Sanitarium, as members of the newly formed Seventh-day Adventist Church, the healthcare pioneers believed God had called them to follow the example of Jesus Christ. They dedicated themselves to continuing Christ's ministry of healing the physical, emotional, and spiritual needs of others, while pursuing innovative ways to make healthcare safer and more effective. Their approach to caring for the whole person and not just treating illness was revolutionary back in 1866. And of course, now there's all these studies that prayer contributes to the physical healing of individuals in hospitals. They've done many studies on this, and it's come true. We are physical, emotional, right? Spiritual beings. They are all linked. Definitely all linked. Mary Todd Lincoln and Henry Ford were patients right over the lake there in Michigan, where the sanitarium was established. It was very, very extensive. And Dr. Kellogg, as you are probably aware, headed that up for many, many years. And now, here we are, our modern days. Stanford Medicine, a 2023 study, found that a vegan diet can improve cardiovascular health in as little as 8 weeks. Another study found that people on plant-based diets had an average 7% decrease in total cholesterol, 10% in LDL, and 14% decrease in ApoB levels, which is your cardiovascular health and any buildup in plaque in your arteries. Medical news today, just this year, plant-based diets can provide all the necessary protein, fats, carbohydrates, and so on for optimal health. They're higher in fiber and phytonutrients. Some vegans may need to take supplements. However, you can also get B12 in fortified foods, such as plant milk, cereals, and so on, to meet those vitamin B12 needs. Graham and Ellen White, they also participated in the temperance movement. And you'll see many of these political type of cartoons from back in the day, and they look fanatic, don't they? They have the woman there dumping out the liquor and the moonshine, and these women breaking open the, the vat with the liquor in there. And so really they were kind of the temperance movement. There was a large group, mostly Christian, who was active in the temperance movement, but they were made fun of and they were ostracized by a lot of American society. Father drinks no more. There was a beautiful song in chorus that was entitled that. And when I saw this, I thought of my own family. As I mentioned, I think, I grew up here, left when I was 18 to go out to Arizona State. And really, this is the first time last year, where I've actually lived here in 50 years. And it's been encouraging to see the changes that have gone on in Wisconsin. When it comes to alcohol, you still have a whole lot of bars, though, out here. You have double the bars as Minnesota. And so alcohol, it's a big part of the culture here, as I know you're aware. But we grew up, my father's father literally was a falling down alcoholic. He grew up in Milwaukee. And he died of liver cancer, I think when he was maybe 62, something like that. And my father tells the story. Actually, my grandma told me this story. Obviously, he being a falling down alcoholic, we would go over to their house, and, as those of you who know me, I'm pretty inquisitive, right? Don't hold back. Probably should hold back more than I do. But Grandma, where's Grandpa? And the answer was always the same. He's in the bedroom. And I'd say, why? And she'd say, he has the sleeping disease. And so, back in the day, people weren't open. They hid these things, even though everybody knew. Well, I didn't know. Well, one day, Grandpa came out of that bedroom. And he piled us all in his car, Chevy, the big old cars that we'll see at the Delavan Car Show tomorrow. And there were no seat belts, right? And I was 6 years old. And I remember being in the back seat of that car. And that car was weaving all over the road. And my childhood instinct was scared because I knew something was not right. And my father mentioned, he said he had a paper route. And he had saved and saved on this paper route. And one day, he was saving for a bed, a new bed. And one day his father came into his room. He goes, that money that you've been making for the paper route? I need it. And my father gave that to him and forfeited his bed. And he tells that story because he was so addicted to drink. And as he died, my grandma said, he was on his deathbed, and he said, please, go get me a bottle. And she went down to the liquor store, got the bottle, brought it back in the brown paper bag, and he told her, you're a good woman. And she told me that was the only nice thing he had ever said to her. Isn't that sad? And so when we see Father drinks no more, what a blessing that would have been for that family if indeed Father had decided to turn from the drink. But there wasn't much help back in those days, was there? And it's another day, another story, how AA developed as a Christian organization. And when the Washington Post wrote an article about AA, thousands of people wrote to them and said, where can I get this help? So the help was needed. And people wanted to quit, but they were in just such bondage by the devil. So we know nowadays, right, 11,654 children, mothers, fathers, brothers, everybody died in drunk driving accidents in 2020. And that's only been going up in our country. 32 people die in drunk driving crashes every day in America. Many people don't think of alcohol as a drug because it's so prevalent in our society. But the problem with alcohol is that it can be addictive, even in small amounts. And during the Sabbath school, Victor mentioned a lot of the evangelical churches, very, very common. They didn't used to. When I first became a Christian, the Bible churches and the community churches, people generally didn't drink or not openly. Now, very openly, they have the coffee bars in the churches when you come in, and they get together, not at the church necessarily, but, for their wine and all of that. So very common now. That has shifted in the evangelical and mainline churches. There are 3 million deaths every year related to alcohol use. So anyway, would the political cartoonists change their position now? Would they? We don't really see that kind of satire any longer because we know what Ellen White and Graham and other health reformers of their day, we now know that they were right. And they were ostracized, and made fun of, but they were right. But I have an Adventist friend, and she eats anything, drinks anything. So I remember when I was down at the state capitol there in Arizona, talking to a woman, and she was a Christian, and so, we got to talking, and we went out to lunch, and I ate vegetarian. Oh, you're vegetarian? Yes. Oh, why? Well, and I told her about my beliefs, and she goes, but I have an Adventist friend. She eats and drinks anything, right? So I just think we have to be aware, don't we? Are we a stepping stone or a stumbling block to those around us? Paul talks about that, doesn't he? That we don't want to put a stumbling block in our brother's way. Let's live up to the great light that we have been given, because we are blessed in our church with this advanced message. For there is nothing hidden that will not be disclosed, and nothing concealed that will not be made known and brought to light. So back to Eden, right? With health reform, again, it's a lifestyle. It's not a diet. It's not, a rule, right? It is our lifestyle. God wants to infiltrate every area of our life. And hey, if you eat 2 to 3 times a day, that's a great way to have him, working with you. And you just feel so much better, don't you? You feel so much better. I'm doing respite care for my sister I've shared with you who has advanced Alzheimer's. So I drive up to Mequon, usually on Tuesdays. And my other sister is a year older than I am. She's wonderful. But she has a husband who has had a bad back for years and has been on methotrexate, which is actually a chemo drug that they give. And, just in bad health. And they're a year older than I am. And it was sad because this summer she got pneumonia, and thankfully, I think, Barb, you helped me pray for her. She has recovered now, but she's been down and out for 2-3 months, just recovering and gaining her strength back. If we want to continue to work for the Lord, it's going to take being healthy, isn't it? That's just another reason for taking care of our health. But it is our lifestyle, because we are preparing. We're preparing for heaven. And our lifestyle can change here to prepare for that. We all know the story of Daniel, right? Where he said, give us only vegetables to eat, basically pulse, and water to drink. And that, really was a sacrifice, because water was not clean in those days. That was going to take a big measure of faith to drink water instead of wine, because that water was not safe water to drink. Oftentimes I will research the Jewish writings, the Muslim writings, other religions. I want to hear what they're saying, and are they picking up on any of this truth? And I found this. She talks about the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, so on. And that Daniel, while in exile, right, Jehoiakim ate every day at Nebuchadnezzar's table. But by the Hasmonean period, many in Israel took courage not to eat any unclean food, and they chose to die rather than be defiled by unclean foods. Gentile food had become suspect of being connected to pagan ritual, so it was considered preferable to suffer martyrdom rather than to eat it. And of course, we don't include Maccabees in our sacred writings in our Bible. But they do have, at times, good historical significance. She goes on to say, the book of Daniel is full of miracles and visions. Now, this is a Jewish scholar. Daniel in the lion's den, the 3 boys in the fiery furnace, Belshazzar's feast, to name only the most familiar. So at first sight, it may seem strange that we should have here what is perhaps the first recorded example of a controlled experiment. So they look at that and they go, oh, wow, you have a control group, right? You have this group doing this over here, which is only eating vegetables and drinking water. And then you have this group over here that's eating all of the king's heavy meats and alcohol and delicacies and an overabundance of sugar. And So you've got a control group here, don't you? You've got an experiment going on. She says the Hebrew word zeronim, literally meaning seeds, has been translated as vegetables, right? And as legumes, so those are pulses. Jerome, as elsewhere, clearly familiar with Jewish traditions, which specified that the seeds eaten by Daniel and his friends were pulses. Other Jewish commentaries on the Bible also say that when Esther was taken to King I have trouble with that one. The king Hiram, and given all the food, perfumes, and adornments that she could want to prepare her for the king, she, like Daniel, refused the king's foods and ate only pulses. Now, we don't see that in the book of Esther in our writings, but those commentators believe that is true from the historical records. However, we do know that she instructed the Israelites, or the Hebrews rather, to fast and pray, right? That they did fast for her situation. Muslims, for example, they have Islamic dietary laws, and it prohibits the consumption of pork and byproducts, including gelatin. Animals that are not slaughtered according to Islamic guidelines. This includes animals that are dead before slaughter, improperly slaughtered, or slaughtered in the name of anyone but their God, Allah. Blood and byproducts. They can't eat carnivorous animals, so they could eat deer, they could eat cow, but they can't eat any animal that eats another animal, which is interesting. Of course, alcohol is condemned in the Quran, and food that is sacrificed to idols. So we really do see the world's major religions all have some version of a health message in their writings. And we talked about the Catholic fish fry. When I became Seventh-day Adventist, I'll tell you, my parents, bless their heart, they were confused. They were very confused. Well, why don't you want to eat meat? They thought I was punishing myself by denying myself meat, because their tradition was every Friday we don't eat meat. But it's interesting, I remember in college coming home to Milwaukee, and we would go to this restaurant on the south side called the Dinner Bell. And the Dinner Bell, they had a fish fry. I'll tell you, it gave you enough fat for the whole year. You had that deep fried fish and those deep fried French fries and that tartar sauce and that coleslaw, but was it good, right? Those fish fries. So it took them a long time. And my mother, bless her heart, she tried, she said, well, what will you eat? And I said, well, Mom, we had a joke in our family, it's called Catholic spaghetti. And it was spaghetti she would make with, the ground beef and all of it. I don't know how we got Catholic spaghetti, but I said, Mom, make the Catholic spaghetti, but just take the ground beef out. Just don't put the ground beef in there. And she did that. I said, oh, Mom, this is so good. And, she died at 84. My dad died of 87. So they were meat eaters all their life. For a lot of their life, they had a martini probably 5 days a week. And so, the blue zone, right? The Adventists tend to live about 10 years longer. Some don't. We live in a very fallen world. We can get diseases, right? Genetic aberrations can happen. A chromosome can go awry. Cancer is really 1,700 different diseases. So when we say somebody has cancer, it's a very specific situation that's going on in their body. And when Victor had cancer, it was disturbing because a well-meaning Adventist ran into us in the grocery store. And, Victor hadn't been a vegetarian as long as I had. And she said, well, now you need to be eating kale and this and this and this and this. And I thought, that's a very limited knowledge base that you are coming from. Because when you're dealing with a tumor, that's nice to eat kale. It's awesome, right? But it's not going to kill that tumor. It just isn't. God, by miracle, can. But we need to be careful, the advice that we want to give people. This is wonderful for prevention. But it's not necessarily going to kill something very serious, like a cancer. When I worked for the state of Arizona, this was like 20 years ago, I remember meeting with the head of the naturopathic board. And he said, yeah, we're getting some complaints and we're getting some, lawsuits filed. He said, because what's happened with naturopaths is they have to make a living. So they all concoct their own little potion, Well, if you do this, some had a clay, that they developed. And okay, well, if you have cancer, you put the clay on the tumor and it will draw it out. And there's some good science that contributes to some of this, definitely. But you have to be really careful because he told me, he said, they have to have their potion to be able to sell it. Because doctors come in and, well, they've got they don't have to worry about business, most of them. They're lined up. But the naturopaths, a little different because they're not covered by insurance, he said. So, really people need to be aware that, if they're, the expensive pill, potion, clay, whatever, be cautious. Because so often God's remedies for prevention, they are inexpensive and they are truly natural and can be made with natural things. So be careful with that. Don't get caught up in a lot of that real expensive stuff, or you got to have this potion or this or that. Be cautious of that. Our diet helps to prepare us, like I said, for eternity, doesn't it? And there we have the large banqueting table. And I saw on a Lutheran website, this was at Penn State, the Lutheran group, what a beautiful table. And even they don't have their turkey in the middle of it, do they? Or their ham or whatever. So I think, if you've read the Bible, people understand that there will not be killing in heaven. Veganism is the first world luxury? No, it's not. We can see the average commodity prices of some of these foods, beef being $7.35, lamb, and so on, and then rice, beans, wheat, corn. Back in the day, Victor will tell you the story. They had 10 children. His dad was a master carpenter, and he had, 12 mouths to feed. And that wasn't easy. And a lot of times they had a big pot of beans and a big pot. He has Portuguese ancestry, so they'd have a pot of beans and a pot of rice on the stove. And this is what they ate a lot of times. If they ever did get meat, it was just little slivers. Everybody got a little sliver of the meat. But was that a blessing or was it a curse? It was a blessing, wasn't it? Walter Artiz, I don't know if you've heard of Walter. He was a famous African-American singer. He was a good friend of ours. He actually married us. And Walter would tell the story from his father and grandfather of pot liquor. And pot liquor was on the plantation. And they would take the excess plants that they would give them, and they would boil them. And then they would drink. They would call it pot liquor. They would drink the liquid off of that after those plants had cooked down. It's in our world today, we would make a broth with that, right? We would make a soup base with that. Was that a blessing or was that a curse? So God's ways are usually less expensive than the world's ways. When we look at inflation, yes, when you go to the grocery store, pizzas are probably almost double, and meat has gone up extensively. But you can still buy, I don't know about around here, but in Phoenix we can buy a bag of beans for $1.25. We can buy a pound of rice for $1. We can buy your fresh vegetables, really. We are just waiting for harvest time. I think it's starting about now, isn't it? To come down, visit Helen, look at that farmer's market and get that. Yay. And, we have a few little things. Barb was kind enough to give me a couple tomato plants early in the season, so we're hopeful getting our own tomatoes there. But yes, inflation, but look at what has inflated. I just challenge you to go to the grocery store. All your packaged items, all your processed foods, your frozen foods, they have probably, in a lot of cases, doubled. But a lot of those staples, I think God has his hand on those things because he will allow us to be able to afford good, healthy food. That's right. If the world went vegan, it could save 8 million lives by 2050. 50, reduce greenhouse gases. Because again, we're growing so much of this corn you see right on the countryside, it's grown to do what? Yep, feed the cows, right? It's feeding the cows so that we can get our protein secondhand. Whereas if we would just eat it directly, these resources could be redeployed. Then there's the animal activists. And, when we gave that, we were in the breakout group, we had about, 50, 60 people down there in Tucson years ago, probably 15 years ago, and we did a health lecture and a food sampling. And it was really interesting because, we did the talk and demonstrated. And then afterwards, a woman came up and she said, I loved what you said. It's really good the Adventists are doing this. She said, but your shoes. And I said, my shoes. And I looked at my shoes, and what were they made out of? Leather. Right? And so, I've known a lot of these animal activists when we get involved with the health message. And it's an interesting phenomenon because they very, very much care about the animals, which, I certainly concur with. They suffer so much in this slaughtering process. It's really very, very wrong. But they're not getting the principle either, right? They're not getting the principle. They're taking one aspect and not incorporating it into their overall lifestyle. Do you remember furs? I remember growing up, furs, especially in Wisconsin, they were a big thing. If you had a fur, I think it was probably a status symbol, right? Well, furs, I don't know, have they gone away here or are they still big? Not so much though, right? It seemed like every woman wanted her. Remember they'd have those, what were they? With the face on it? Do you know what I'm talking about? And they'd wear them around their neck? A minx. There you go. A mink. And I always, as a kid, God gives insight to kids. I'd look, and I'd see that, mouth and those eyes sitting there, and I just thought that was just something, it's kind of spooky and scary, right? So at least we made some progress in that area. But we won't be eating meat in heaven, will we? No, we won't. It'll be a blessing. The lion indeed will lay down with the lamb. The wolf and the lamb shall graze together. The lion shall eat straw like the ox, and dust shall be the serpent's food. They shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain. And Revelation, he that is unjust, let him be unjust still. He which is filthy, let him be filthy still. And he that is righteous, let him be righteous still. And he that is holy, let him be holy still. Many shall be purified and made white and tried, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. And when we talk about prophecy, this message has gone out. We're the Adventists, we're the leaders in the 1800s. It has now gone out. We're kind of the tail. We used to be the head, now we're kind of the tail following. So this message has been communicated to the world to take care of our bodies, right? We don't need to eat dead animals. When I taught fourth grade, I'll tell you, it was an evangelical Baptist school. But those kids walked away with, there was a Baptist pastor and his wife who had their daughter in my class. And she came and told me, she goes, my dad said, is this woman going to try to make you vegetarian? And that little girl and so many of them, they knew I was a vegetarian. And they'd say, look what I have. I have the creation diet today. And they'd show me their carrots or their orange or whatever. And it was just so exciting because kids naturally, they know that that's right? That we don't have to eat a dead animal for our food. So that was exciting. Blessed are those who are called to the marriage supper of the Lamb. Won't it be wonderful? And this is a struggle. My lifestyle and everything, it's a struggle some days. Because, my flesh wants to do this, right? My flesh wants to eat this. My flesh wants to... It's not necessarily easy. Now, I was unusual, I think. A lot of people probably gradually get off meat, for example. For some reason, one day I ate it, the next day I never ate it again. Now, that's not true. Now, it took me 4 years to get off sharp cheddar cheese. Loved that sharp cheddar cheese until I found out about rennet and all that stuff that's in most of it. But, so it's different for every person. Your struggle is different than my struggle, but we all have them, right? And the key is that we're working towards, we're letting God take our lives and we're surrendering our lives. That's the key, right? And that's why we can never judge each other. Can't judge someone if they're eating meat, if they're still drinking wine or this or that. We can't judge others because we all have our own personal struggle. But the key is, let's keep moving, right, in the right direction to the marriage supper of the Lamb. Okay, let's have a word of prayer, and then we're going to conclude with Come Thou Fount of Many Blessings, which is by Fernando Ortega. He's a beautiful singer. He's from the Anglican Church, actually, but he's out of Albuquerque, and we just really enjoy his music. Gracious Father, I thank you for everyone who is here today. What a blessing. They're all living their lives, Lord, as a shining light for you. And their devotion to this church and to one another is truly a witness for you. Lord, help us with our struggles. We all have them. Give us the victory, Lord, over sin and self and appetite and all these things that the world makes look so enticing, Lord. And I just thank you that Ellen White and these other health reformers have been vindicated. She will be very, very surprised at the resurrection to say, "Ooh, we found out. The world found out what you said is true." So I thank you for this deep message. Embed it into our hearts, Lord, is my prayer. In Jesus' name, amen.
Come thou fount of every blessing, tune my heart to sing thy grace. Streams of mercy never ceasing, call for songs of loudest praise. Teach me some melodious sonnet, sung by flaming tongues above. Praise his name, I'm fixed upon it, the name of God's redeeming love. Hitherto thy love has blessed me, thou hast drawn me to this place, and I know thy hand will lead me safely home by thy good grace. Jesus sought me when a stranger, wandering from the fold of God. He to rescue me from danger bought me with his precious blood. Oh, to grace, how great a debtor daily unconstrained to be. Let thy goodness like a fetter bind my wandering heart to thee. take and seal it for thy courts above. Here's my heart. Here's my heart. Here's my heart. Here's my heart. Oh, take and seal it for thy courts above.